She was untouchable by tradition, yet he reached her soul. The emissary's dilemma. The diplomatic vessel Starweaver glided through Parnassus's sapphire atmosphere, its hull refracting the light of 3 moons suspended in perpetual dawn. Inside, Liana Thorne adjusted the collar of her formal attire, silver and azure to honor the host planet's colors, while mentally reviewing her briefing materials one final time. Approaching Crystalline Haven in 3 minutes, announced the ship's AI. Vaesarian welcoming delegation detected at landing coordinates. Liana inhaled deeply, centering herself. At 28, she was considered remarkably young for a diplomatic emissary, but her unique sensitivity to non-verbal communication had made her the Terran Coalition's natural choice for this critical first contact. "Remember," Commander Donovan's voice crackled through her earpiece, "the Vaesarians agreed to these negotiations only if we honor their communicative traditions. Their entire society functions through thought transference. They haven't used vocal speech in millennia." "I've studied extensively," Liana replied, brushing a strand of auburn hair from her face. "Their thought transference requires physical proximity or specialized crystalline technology." "Precisely. You'll work exclusively through High Sentinel Jorath. The Coalition needs those rare mineral exports, but we can't afford another diplomatic incident like Proxima Centauri." The Starweaver settled onto a platform of iridescent crystal with barely a tremor. Liana took a final moment to compose herself before facing the alien delegation. When the bay doors slid open, Parnassus revealed itself in breathtaking splendor, floating spires of translucent crystal suspended above valleys of shimmering blue vegetation. The welcoming party consisted of 5 Vaesarians, their tall, willowy forms draped in flowing garments that seemed woven from light itself. Their skin ranged from pale silver to deep cerulean, marked with luminescent patterns that pulsed with gentle rhythm. The tallest stood at the center, distinguished by intricate platinum markings across his forehead and a series of crystal implants along his temples. High Sentinel Jorath placed a 6-fingered hand against his chest and bowed slightly. Liana felt a gentle pressure against her consciousness, like fingers brushing against her mind. "Emissary Thorne, Parnassus acknowledges your presence." The mental voice was melodious yet formal. Liana returned the gesture precisely as instructed in the diplomatic manual. "I am honored by Parnassus's acknowledgement and bring peaceful intentions from the Terran Coalition," she said aloud, while focusing her thoughts on respect and openness. With the formal exchange complete, Jorath gestured toward an awaiting transport crafted from living crystal that hovered silently above the ground. "We have prepared accommodations in the outer sanctum. The council will convene at second moonrise." As they glided over sweeping plains of undulating blue flora, Jorath explained the significance of various structures through directed thoughts that manifested in Liana's mind as both words and impressions. "There lies the contemplation spire, where younglings learn thought discipline. Beyond stand the harmonic towers, where our mind-shapers perfect the art of collective consciousness." "And that?" Liana asked, indicating a massive crystal palace floating at the city's heart, its architecture defying physical laws. Jorath's expression tightened, the markings on his face briefly flashing brighter. "The Grand Nexus, home of the sacred crystals, none but the High Council may enter." His mental tone suggested the topic was closed. The outer sanctum proved to be a marvel of Vaesarian architecture. Walls that shifted in response to emotional energies, furnishings that adapted to the occupant's physical needs, windows that could focus on distant locations like living telescopes. That evening, as Liana prepared her strategy for the next day's negotiations, a soft chime indicated a visitor. Opening the door, she found a young Vaesarian, skin the palest silver she had seen, eyes wide with what appeared to be anxiety. "Emissary," the mental voice was hesitant, almost trembling. I bring information that cannot be shared through official channels. Liana's diplomatic training activated immediately. This could be anything from a trap to a genuine plea for help. "Please continue," she said carefully. The young Vasarian glanced nervously down the corridor before slipping into the room. To Liana's shock, instead of projecting thoughts, his lips moved and actual sound emerged, a whisper so faint she had to lean forward to hear. "My name is Riven. What they've told you about our society is false." Liana froze. According to her briefing, Vasarians were physically incapable of vocal speech. "How are you?" "Speaking," Riven finished, his voice gaining confidence though remaining quiet. "We all can, or could. It's not a biological limitation, it's control." He pressed a small crystal into her palm. "This will guide you to the ancient ruins in the Forbidden Valley. Before the High Council's rule, before the sacred tradition of thought transfer, we were a species of singers and poets. Our voices created beauty that resonated through the crystal formations of our world." "Why tell me this?" Liana asked, feeling the weight of the small crystal in her hand. "Because you're an outsider who still uses her voice," Riven said, moving toward the door. "The Council fears your influence. They fear what would happen if Vasarians remembered we have a choice." He paused. "The trade negotiations are a pretense. They need your technology to enhance the crystals that suppress dissent." Before Liana could respond, he vanished into the corridor. Protocol demanded she report this immediately to Commander Donovan. Instead, Liana found herself slipping the crystal into her pocket, curiosity and intuition overriding years of diplomatic training. Hours later, having slipped past the perimeter sensors using the crystal as a scrambler, Liana stood within the ruins of what appeared to be an ancient amphitheater. The curved walls, though crumbling, were carved with intricate patterns that resembled sound waves. At the center stood a crystalline pedestal. When she placed Riven's crystal into the receptacle at its center, the ruins came alive with holographic projections, Vasarians singing, their voices creating patterns in the air that transformed into physical structures. The crystal technology she'd seen throughout Parnassus was being formed and shaped by harmonized vocal resonance. "Now you understand." Riven emerged from the shadows, accompanied by several other young Vasarians. "The Council claims our silence maintains the purity of thought transference. In reality, they fear the power of our voices." "But why?" Liana asked, transfixed by the holographic history unfolding around her. "Voice gives individuality," said a female Vasarian stepping forward. "Thought transference can be monitored, controlled, filtered. They've suppressed our voices for generations, using specialized crystals that dampen neural pathways associated with speech. We've found ways to counteract the suppression," Riven explained. "But we're few and the Council's power is absolute, until now." "What can I possibly do?" Liana asked, aware she was witnessing something revolutionary. "Your presence has created an opportunity," Riven said. "For the first time in centuries, someone who uses their voice freely walks among us. The Council fears you might inspire others." A disturbance echoed through the ruins, the whine of approaching security drones. "They've discovered your absence," Riven said urgently. "Return to your quarters through the path shown on the crystal. Tomorrow at the negotiations, watch for our signal." "What signal?" Liana asked as the group began to disperse. Riven's eyes met hers with intensity. "When the moment comes, Emissary Thorn, you must choose between your diplomatic mission and justice for an entire species whose voices have been stolen." As she slipped back into the diplomatic compound, Liana's mind raced with implications. Commander Donovan had been explicit: secure the mineral rights at all costs. The coalition needed those resources for the survival of 3 colony worlds. Yet as she entered her quarters, Liana couldn't forget the holographic images of Vasarians singing, creating beauty and technology through the harmony of their voices. Something precious had been stolen from them, all to maintain the power of a ruling elite. The diplomatic meetings the next day proceeded in a haze of unreality. Liana participated mechanically in discussions of trade routes and mining rights, while her thoughts remained fixed on Riven and the forbidden truth hidden in the ruins. "You seem distracted, emissary," High Sentinel Jorth noted during a recess, his cerulean face unreadable. "Cultural immersion can be overwhelming," Liana replied smoothly. "Your world is fascinating." Jorth's eyes narrowed, the platinum markings on his face briefly brightening. "Some aspects of our culture are not meant for outsider appreciation. Focus on our mutual objectives, not cultural exploration." As the council reconvened, Liana noticed a subtle change in the chamber. Several younger council aides, including one she recognized from Riven's group, had positioned themselves near the chamber's crystal amplifiers. Then she saw it, the signal, a pattern of light moving through the crystals, reminiscent of sound waves. The moment of choice had arrived. The silent revolution. The council chamber erupted in chaos as the crystal amplifiers began to pulse with unfamiliar patterns. High Sentinel Jorth rose from his seat, his face contorted with fury as the lights flickered and dimmed. What is the meaning of this disruption? His mental voice thundered through the room, causing several Vaesarian officials to wince. Liana watched as Riven stepped forward from among the aides, his silver skin almost luminous against the darkened chamber. The young Vaesarian placed his hand on the central crystal node, a position reserved only for council elders. "For generations we have lived in silence," Riven spoke aloud, his voice echoing through the chamber like a physical force. "Today we reclaim our birthright." The council members recoiled as if struck. Some covered their ears, others fell to their knees. Jorth's mental projection became a chaotic storm of disbelief and rage. "Abomination, guards seize this criminal." Security personnel moved forward, but hesitated as more young Vaesarians stepped from their positions around the room, joining Riven in a circle around the crystal node. "Emissary Thorn," Riven called, extending his hand. "The evidence you discovered in the ruins, will you share it with the assembly?" All eyes turned to Liana. This was the moment of choice Riven had warned her about. Supporting the rebels meant potentially destroying the trade negotiation, violating diplomatic protocol, and perhaps even triggering an interspecies incident. Liana took a deep breath and stepped forward, removing Riven's crystal from her pocket. "High Sentinel Jorth," she said clearly, "as representative of the Terran Coalition, I formally request that the full council view this historical record before proceeding with our negotiations." "This is unprecedented," Jorth responded verbally, shocking everyone present. His voice was raspy from disuse, but the fact that he could speak at all contradicted everything the council had claimed about Vaesarian physiology. Liana placed the crystal into the central node. The chamber transformed as holographic images surrounded them, ancient Vaesarians singing in harmony, their voices creating and shaping the very crystal technology that now formed their civilization. 3 centuries ago," Riven explained as the images shifted through time, "the council discovered that vocal harmonics could be used to manipulate consciousness itself. Rather than sharing this power, they monopolized it by suppressing everyone's ability to speak, enforcing thought transference as the only acceptable form of communication." The hologram showed the first suppression devices being installed throughout Parnassus's major cities, crystal nodes that emitted specific frequencies to dampen neural pathways associated with speech. "The minerals you seek," Riven continued, addressing Liana but ensuring all could hear, "are the key components of these suppression devices. The Council doesn't need them for technology. They need them to strengthen their control as more Vaesarians awaken to the truth." Council Elder Nestra, the oldest member present, slowly rose from her seat. To everyone's surprise, she began to sing, a haunting melody that caused the crystals throughout the chamber to resonate in harmony. "The old songs," she spoke when the melody ended. "I was just a child when they silenced us. I had almost forgotten." One by one, other council members began to test their vocal capabilities, some producing only rasping sounds, others managing words, a few even attempting brief melodies. Jorth stood isolated, his expression hardening as he watched control slipping away. "This changes nothing," he declared. "Our society functions through thought transference. Returning to primitive vocalization would destabilize centuries of progress." "Not returning," Riven countered. "Evolving. Both forms of communication have value. One should not suppress the other." A senior Vaesarian diplomat named Thelen approached Liana, speaking softly. "Emissary, what does the Terran coalition truly seek from Parnassus? If it is merely minerals, there are alternatives that don't require strengthening the suppression network." Liana recognized the diplomatic opening. "The coalition seeks partnership, not exploitation. If alternate minerals exist, we would prefer an exchange that benefits all Vaesarians, not just the ruling council." Jorth's voice cut through the murmurs. "This meeting is adjourned. Guards, secure the chamber and detain the instigators." But the security forces remained motionless, many of them experimenting with their own voices for the first time. "No," said the chief guard, the single word clearly difficult but delivered with determination. "We will not enforce silence any longer." The next several hours unfolded in a blend of disorder and revelation. As word spread throughout the crystalline haven, Vaesarians gathered in public spaces, attempting speech, sharing songs remembered only in dreams. The suppression nodes throughout the city were deactivated one by one, each shutdown greeted with a chorus of newly liberated voices. Liana found herself in an emergency communication with Commander Donovan, trying to explain the dramatic shift in diplomatic circumstances. "You did what?" the commander's holographic projection demanded. "The council was our only recognized authority on Parnassus." "The council was maintaining power through technological oppression," Liana replied firmly. "As per Section 17 of Coalition Diplomatic Code, I determined that continuing negotiations would violate the non-support of oppressive regimes clause. The resources are being renegotiated with a transitional authority that includes both council members and reform advocates," Liana interrupted. "We'll have our minerals, Commander, but through ethical means." Donovan's expression shifted from anger to reluctant acceptance. "The Oversight Committee won't like this, Thorn." "Then I'll tender my resignation upon return," she replied calmly. "But I won't facilitate technological suppression of an entire species." After the communication ended, Liana found Riven coordinating with a mixed group of former council members and young activists in the central plaza. "Your career?" he asked quietly. "Uncertain," Liana admitted, "but worth the risk." "You know," Riven said, watching Vaesarians all around them experimenting with vocal communication, "there's an ancient legend that says our world was awakened by an outsider's voice. I never understood it until now." In the days that followed, Parnassus underwent a transformation. While thought transference remained the primary mode of communication for complex or private exchanges, vocal speech became increasingly common for emotional expression, artistic creation, and public discourse. The Grand Nexus, once restricted to council members, was opened as a center for studying the harmonics of crystal technologies. Researchers discovered that combining vocal harmonics with thought transference created possibilities neither method could achieve alone. A week after what was now being called the Resonance Day, a new diplomatic ceremony was held. Representatives from every Vaesarian community gathered with the Terran delegation to formalize a revised agreement. Elder Nestra, now heading the transitional government, addressed the assembly with alternating spoken words and mental projections, a new communicative style already gaining popularity. "Today marks the beginning of true exchange between our peoples," she said, projected. "The Terran Coalition will receive access to our mineral resources, not those used for suppression, but rarer crystals from the harmonic mountains that amplify communication rather than restricting it." Liana stepped forward to complete the formal acceptance. As she recited the traditional words of alliance, she added a few phrases in the ancient Vaesarian musical language she had been studying, a gesture that sent appreciative murmurs through the crowd. Later, as the diplomatic vessel prepared for departure, Riven joined Liana on the observation deck. "The Coalition has appointed me permanent ambassador to Parnassus," she told him, gazing out at the crystalline spires now resonating with the songs of their inhabitants. "Apparently, my catastrophic protocol breach yielded surprisingly positive results." Riven laughed, a sound still new to him but increasingly natural. "And the Council?" "Jorith and his closest allies have retreated to the far mountains," Liana said, "but most have joined the transitional government. Change is difficult but necessary." "We have a saying, or had one before it was suppressed," Riven replied. "The truest voice is the one that frees other voices to speak." As the Starweaver lifted from the crystal platform, Liana watched Parnassus recede through the viewport. The floating spires now pulsed with new patterns of light, visual representations of the songs being sung below. A world awakening to its own voice after centuries of imposed silence. In her quarters, she began drafting her official report to Coalition headquarters. The document would determine the future of relations, with Parnassus and potentially set precedent for all diplomatic engagements with newly contacted civilizations. She hesitated over the title, then smiled and typed. "Whispers Across the Void: How Breaking Protocol Prevented Cultural Extinction and Secured a Lasting Alliance." Some rules, Liana reflected, were made to be broken, especially when silence was being enforced rather than chosen. The Legacy of Harmony. The diplomatic vessel Starweaver soared through the cosmos, leaving the crystalline world of Parnassus behind. Inside her private quarters, Ambassador Liana Thorne reviewed the holographic records of the historic agreement. 6 months had passed since the Resonance Day revolution, and her controversial decision had transformed into a diplomatic triumph. A gentle chime announced an incoming transmission. Commander Donovan's stern face materialized before her. "Ambassador Thorne," he nodded formally, "the Coalition Council has reviewed your final assessment of Parnassian integration. I must admit, your unorthodox methods have yielded unexpected benefits." Liana smiled. "The Vaesarian's dual communication system has applications beyond anything we anticipated. Their crystal-enhanced thought transfer technology is already revolutionizing our long-range communications." "Indeed," Donovan agreed reluctantly. "Which brings me to your next assignment. A situation has developed on Meridian Prime that requires your particular approach to diplomacy." Liana raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "Meaning sometimes breaking protocol achieves what following it cannot," he admitted with a grimace. "You depart from Meridian in 2 standard days. Full briefing incoming." After the transmission ended, Liana gazed at the stars streaking past her viewport. Her thoughts drifted to Riven and the transformation sweeping through Vaesarian society. A renaissance of voice and song blended with their telepathic abilities, creating a cultural flowering unprecedented in their history. Some revolutions, she reflected, began not with violence but with a simple, powerful truth: the courage to speak when silence had been decreed as sacred.